Husband kicked his wife out of the house. 9 years later, she returned rich and with 4 kids who looked just like him. Jessica Mitchell never imagined her life would change so drastically in a single night. All the sacrifices made in the name of love and the dreams postponed for years now seemed like foolish naivety as she listened to her husband's cruel words in front of dozens of important guests. It was during the celebration of his Executive of the Year award that Michael Reynolds, CEO of the largest real estate developer in New York City, erupted in fury when questioned by one of the guests about when he planned to have children. His face red with anger and alcohol, he pointed a finger at Jessica. "This woman is useless," he shouted, knocking over his champagne glass. 9 years of marriage and nothing. Can't even give me a child, and you still expect me to celebrate." Silence fell over the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Jessica, elegant in her navy blue dress, felt the ground vanish beneath her feet as every eye turned to her. "Michael, please, let's talk at home," she whispered, trying to calm him. "Home? What home?" He laughed scornfully. "That mansion in the Upper East Side is mine, built with my money, my sweat. What have you contributed? Nothing. Not even an heir." One of the executive's wives tried to intervene, but Michael only grew louder. "You know what I hate most about you, Jessica? That pitiful look of yours, like you're always waiting. Waiting for what? For me to keep my promise of having kids once the company was stable. Well, the company's thriving now, so where are our children?" Jessica tried to speak, but Michael cut her off again. "It's over. When you get home, pack your things and get out of my life. If you can't be a mother, you're good for nothing." The public humiliation was witnessed by everyone, partners, clients, and the couple's friends. Tears streamed down Jessica's face as she walked through the crowd toward the exit, clinging to the last shreds of her dignity. When she arrived home, she found her suitcases already packed by the door, as if Michael had planned this long ago. The private security guard stared at the floor, embarrassed, as she gathered only the essentials: documents, some of her grandmother's jewelry, and basic clothes. With no money of her own, no career, and nowhere to go, Jessica took a cab to the bus station, planning to return to her hometown, Boston. It was in line for a ticket that a familiar voice called out, "Jessica, Jessica Mitchell." "My God, is that really you?" Turning, she saw Professor Eleanor Wright, her former constitutional law professor and mentor, a 70-year-old woman with perfectly styled silver hair and an elegant posture. Even retired from the bench, Eleanor still had the piercing gaze that once intimidated students and lawyers when she presided over the Supreme Court. "What happened, my dear?" Eleanor asked, noticing the tears and the suitcase. In a rush, Jessica told her everything: how she'd abandoned her promising law career to support Michael's ventures, how he'd promised they'd have children once the company stabilized, the countless failed attempts to conceive, and the doctors who found no reason for her infertility. And finally, that night's public humiliation. "Come with me," Eleanor said, gripping Jessica's arm with surprising strength for her age. "You're not going to Boston. You'll stay at my place until you get back on your feet." The ride to Eleanor's apartment was silent. Jessica, physically and emotionally drained, barely registered the journey. When they arrived, the former judge gently led her to a flawlessly kept guest room. "Rest now. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps." Alone in the room, Jessica finally let herself collapse. The tears she had held back at the party and the taxi at the bus station came like an uncontrollable torrent. She cried for the lost time, the abandoned career, the children she never had, the public humiliation. She cried until she fell asleep. Still dressed on the handmade crochet bedspread, she woke up disoriented, with the afternoon sun lighting up the unfamiliar room. For a brief moment, she imagined she was in the guest room of the mansion in the Upper East Side, after an argument with Michael. Then reality hit her again. She no longer had a home, no longer had a husband, no longer had the life she'd known for the past 9 years. In the adjacent bathroom, she found clean towels and toiletries carefully arranged. Eleanor had thought of everything. After a hot shower, Jessica found clean clothes folded on the bed, simple, comfortable pieces her former professor must have worn at home. In the kitchen, Eleanor was preparing tea, the scent of lemon balm filling the cozy space. "I thought you might be hungry," the older woman remarked, placing homemade bread and jam on the table. "Eat something, and then we'll talk." Jessica obeyed, only then realizing how famished she was. As she ate, she discreetly observed the apartment. It was elegant without being showy, with walls lined with books and small works of art Eleanor must have collected over her legal career. Photographs in silver frames showed a life rich in experiences. Eleanor Young at her graduation, Eleanor in Paris by the Eiffel Tower, Eleanor receiving an award likely when she became a judge. "You never married?" The question slipped out before Jessica could stop it. Eleanor smiled, unoffended by the curiosity. "Almost twice. The first time I was too young and he wanted me to give up law. The second I was already a judge and he couldn't stand having a woman with more power than him." She shrugged. "I chose my career and never regretted it." The answer resonated deeply with Jessica, who had made the exact opposite choice. The next morning, sitting on the balcony of Eleanor's apartment in Beacon Hill, the former judge looked intently at Jessica. "You were the brightest student I ever had. What happened to that determined young woman who wanted to change the American legal system?" "She fell in love," Jessica replied bitterly, "and believed a man when he said her talent was wasted, that she'd be happier as the wife of a great businessman. And now? Now I'm 35 with no career, no home, and apparently no ability to have children." Eleanor poured more coffee and looked seriously at her former student. "That's what Michael wants you to believe. But tell me one thing. Did you have all the tests done, including his sperm count?" Jessica hesitated. Michael refused. "He said the problem was clearly with me since he comes from a big family." "Interesting," Eleanor murmured. "And your medication? Who managed it?" "Michael," Jessica began, then stopped, realizing where her mentor was going. "He insisted on reminding me of the times. He even sorted the pills for me every morning." A heavy silence fell between them as Jessica processed the possibility she had never considered. "No, he wouldn't do that," she said, shaking her head. "Why would someone sabotage attempts to have a child he claimed to want so badly?" "Are you sure he wanted it?" Eleanor questioned. "Or was it just something he promised for the future? Always the future, never the present." Before Jessica could answer, the doorbell rang. It was Mariana, Eleanor's niece and a pharmacist. At her aunt's request, she analyzed the medication Jessica had brought in her toiletry bag. 3 hours later, the test results would change Jessica's life forever. Her supposed fertility supplements contained high doses of contraceptives. For years, while pretending to support her in the quest for a child, Michael had systematically sabotaged any possibility of pregnancy. "But why?" sobbed Jessica, devastated by the discovery. "Power and control," answered Eleanor. "And now you have two choices. You can drown in this betrayal or use it as fuel to reclaim everything he took from you." That night, Jessica made a decision. She would return to the law and rebuild her life piece by piece. In the following months, with Eleanor's help, Jessica prepared for the Bar Association exam while working as a legal assistant at a small firm. Her nights were dedicated to studying, reviewing concepts and catching up on legislative changes from recent years. In her rare moments of rest, she allowed herself to cry for the life she had lost, but always rose with renewed determination. "He broke my heart, but he won't break my spirit," she repeated to herself every morning. 6 months after that fateful night at the Plaza Hotel, Jessica passed the bar exam and received an offer to work at a family law firm in Cambridge. The city, just an hour from New York City, offered the perfect balance. Close enough to maintain her new support network, but far enough to start fresh without Michael's constant shadow. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. At the new firm, Jessica quickly stood out. Her personal experience made her especially sensitive to cases involving women harmed in divorces and family disputes. Within a year, she became the most sought-after attorney in the office, particularly by female clients who connected with her empathetic yet firm approach. It was during a particularly difficult case involving a client whose ex-husband had hidden assets that Jessica met Dr. Amanda Collins, a renowned reproductive medicine specialist, serving as an expert witness. After the trial, a victory for Jessica's client, Amanda invited her for coffee. "Your argument was brilliant," the doctor praised. "I rarely see lawyers with such passion and precision at once." "Thank you. Let's just say I have personal motivations to ensure men don't get away with deceiving their wives." Something in Jessica's expression piqued Amanda's curiosity, and she asked about her story. Hesitant at first, but seeing a potential ally in the doctor, Jessica shared her experience. "That's criminal," Amanda declared, outraged. "If I could help in any way—" She stopped abruptly, as if an idea had struck her. After a thoughtful pause, she continued, "I don't know if it's relevant, but your ex-husband, Michael Reynolds, participated in a fertility study for executives about 5 years ago. I coordinated the research." Jessica's heart raced. "What kind of study?" "We analyzed the impact of stress and lifestyle on high-level executives' genetic material quality." Amanda hesitated before adding, "All participants provided samples, preserved for future research, with documented consent." The implications hit Jessica like lightning. If Michael's samples still existed— "I'm not suggesting anything," Amanda added quickly, noticing Jessica's distant gaze. "I just thought you should know." Amanda's words echoed in Jessica's mind the entire trip back to Cambridge. In her apartment, she sat in the armchair by the window and contemplated the possibility before her. Would using Michael's genetic material to conceive be ethical? Would it be fair? Or was it just a twisted form of revenge? The next morning, she called Eleanor. "I need your opinion," she said after explaining the situation. "Not as a friend, but as a legal scholar. Is what I'm considering legal? Is it ethical?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Legally, it's a gray area," Eleanor finally replied. "The material was voluntarily donated for research with a consent form. The question is whether that consent extends to reproduction." The former judge paused. "As for ethics, Jessica, that's something only you can decide. What's your true motivation?" That question haunted Jessica for weeks. During lonely nights in her apartment, she imagined what it would be like to have a child, a piece of herself to love unconditionally, her own family to replace all she had lost. Sometimes, she admitted to herself, she also imagined the satisfaction of Michael finding out years later that he had a child he would never know. Would it be for love or revenge? She asked aloud one night as she watched the rain through the window. The answer came in fragments over several weeks. She visited orphanages, considered adoption, spoke with single mothers. She attended support groups for women who had survived abusive relationships. With each meeting, with each conversation, her certainty grew. She wanted to be a mother regardless of Michael, regardless of the past. At the same time, her career flourished. She had been promoted to partner at the firm. Her name gained recognition in legal circles, and her financial independence was secure. If there was ever an ideal time to take this step, it was now. One Friday afternoon, 2 months after her initial conversation with Amanda, Jessica booked an appointment at the clinic. "I've thought a lot about what we discussed," she said, resolved. "I want to use Michael's genetic material to attempt a pregnancy. Not out of revenge, but because it's my right to have a child. For years, he stole that possibility from me. I won't let him keep stealing it from my future." That conversation planted a seed that would grow in the months ahead. Jessica, who had dismissed the idea of motherhood after discovering Michael's betrayal, began reconsidering her options. Why should she give up her dream of motherhood because of his lies? A year later, now established as a partner at the firm and with her finances stable, Jessica scheduled an appointment with Amanda at her private clinic. "I've thought a lot about what we discussed," she said firmly. "I want to use Michael's genetic material to try for a pregnancy." Amanda looked concerned. "Jessica, I understand your reasons, but there are ethical and legal issues involved. Michael gave consent for research, not reproduction." "And did he give consent to sabotage my attempts to get pregnant?" Jessica shot back bitterly. "For years he deceived me, made me believe I was infertile, that something was wrong with me. Now that I know I can have children, that I have this right, why should I give it up?" After long discussions and ethical Considerations. Amanda agreed to perform the procedure, on the condition it remained strictly confidential. The genetic material would be used for in vitro fertilization, and Jessica would finally fulfill her dream of becoming a mother. Fate, however, had grander plans. On the first attempt, not only was the procedure successful, but it resulted in something extremely rare. 4 identical embryos formed. Amanda had never seen anything like it in her career. Identical quadruplets, Jessica, the doctor explained, showing the ultrasound. The odds of this happening naturally are less than 1 in a million. Even with IVF, it's incredibly rare. Jessica stared at the 4 tiny pulsing dots on the screen, a mix of fear and wonder washing over her. 4, she murmured. 4 identical children. It's an extremely high-risk pregnancy, warned Amanda. We could consider embryo reduction to increase the chances for the others. No, Jessica replied immediately. If these 4 babies chose to come into the world together, who am I to stop them? The following months were filled with intense preparation. Jessica adjusted her office routine, converted her apartment to accommodate 4 babies, and hired a support team for after the birth. The pregnancy was difficult, with long periods of strict bed rest, but Jessica faced each challenge with the same determination that had rebuilt her career. Meanwhile, her professional reputation grew. A particularly complex case involving inheritance, rights caught the attention of the Fairmont Group, Michael Reynolds' main competitor. Impressed by her competence, they offered her the position of Chief Legal Officer. Why me? Jessica asked during the interview, well aware that her multiple pregnancy was already evident. Because you're the best, Catherine Fairmont, the group's CEO, replied bluntly. And because you know Michael Reynolds better than anyone. We're aware he engages in questionable practices, and I need someone who can anticipate his moves. Jessica accepted the offer, on the condition that she would start after maternity leave. The irony wasn't lost on her. She would be using her intimate knowledge of Michael to benefit his competitors, just as he had used her trust against her. In her 7th month of pregnancy, complications forced Jessica into an emergency delivery. The 4 boys were born prematurely, requiring weeks in the NICU. Jessica divided her time between the hospital and final preparations for her new role. It was during an especially tense night, when the most fragile of the babies had a respiratory crisis, that she received a message that chilled her blood. I know what you did. The boys look just like their father. How much is this secret worth? The message came from a NICU nurse who had recognized the resemblance between the babies and Michael, whose face often appeared in business magazines. Jessica confronted the situation head-on. She faced the nurse, secured a legally airtight confidentiality agreement, and ensured the news wouldn't spread. Still, the incident made Jessica realize she couldn't hide the truth forever. Eventually, her sons would ask about their father, and Michael might find out, but that would be a problem for the future. For now, her focus was ensuring all 4 boys survived and grew stronger. Months later, with the babies finally home and healthy, Jessica took up her position at the Fairmont Group. The transition wasn't easy. Her nights were fragmented between bottles and diapers, and her days were packed with meetings and crucial decisions. The team she'd hired to help with the quadruplets proved essential, yet Jessica still felt the weight of her new reality. How do you manage? Catherine Fairmont asked, after Jessica flawlessly presented a complex report following a sleepless night with Mason, who had been colicky. One day at a time, Jessica replied, with a tired but satisfied smile. It's not easy, but it's mine. The routine with 4 identical babies was a challenge Jessica hadn't fully anticipated. In the early months, she painted each of their nails a different color to avoid mixing them up, until their distinct personalities began to emerge, making them unmistakable in her eyes as their mother. Ethan was the first to smile, an observant boy who seemed to catalog everything around him. Noah was the first to crawl, determined to explore every corner of the house. Mason, the most sensitive, cried when his brothers got hurt, as if he felt their pain. And Jacob, the calmest, spent hours staring at the crib mobiles, lost in his own world. There are 4 distinct personalities in identical bodies, Jessica explained to Eleanor during one of her monthly visits to Cambridge. How would Michael React if he knew, asked the former judge, always direct. He'd probably consider it a long-term investment, Jessica replied sarcastically, thinking of her ex-husband. 4 heirs for the price of 1. As expected, her insight into Michael's methods proved invaluable to the Fairmont Group. Within 2 years, she had helped the company gain significant market share, often anticipating her ex-husband's strategies. Every professional achievement was a personal victory, proof that the humiliation she'd endured hadn't broken her but strengthened her. The boys, Ethan, Noah, Mason, and Jacob, grew up strong and healthy. With blonde hair and blue eyes identical to Michael's, Jessica raised them with values opposite to their biological fathers. Honesty, empathy, and respect were the foundation of their upbringing. Their first birthday was an intimate celebration, attended only by Eleanor and a few of Jessica's close friends. As she watched her sons covered in chocolate cake, she caught herself wondering how Michael would react if he saw them. Would he recognize their unique personalities, or would he see only 4 replicas of himself? By the time the boys turned 2, Jessica faced an unexpected dilemma. During a routine checkup, the pediatrician asked about their paternal medical history. Is there anything I should know? Family illnesses, allergies, genetic conditions? Jessica realized with dismay that she didn't have that information. Despite using Michael's genetic material, she knew very little about his family's health. Maybe it's time to consider reaching out, even if just briefly, Eleanor suggested when Jessica shared her concern. Not for him, but for the boys. I'm not ready, Jessica replied. And neither are they. How would I explain it? This is your biological father who doesn't know you exist because I used his sperm without permission. It's more complicated than that, and you know. Eleanor countered. They'll have questions someday and you'll need answers. Jessica postponed the decision, but the thought lingered. Meanwhile, she focused on building a fulfilling life for her children. At the same time, Michael was facing troubles of his own. His company had become embroiled in a scandal involving inflated costs in public contracts, and investigations pointed to possible tax fraud. Ironically, the case had reached the firm where Jessica still held a stake. She refused to take on his defense, but followed the developments closely. Life continued its course until just before the boy's 8th birthday, Jacob began showing strange symptoms: persistent fatigue, skin rashes, and joint pain. After a series of tests, the diagnosis hit like a blow, a rare genetic condition that required detailed information about his paternal family history. We need to know if there are cases in the father's family, the doctor explained. Certain genetic variations could completely change our treatment approach. Jessica knew the moment she had feared had arrived. She would have to face Michael and reveal the existence of their sons. 9 years after being humiliated and cast out of her home, Jessica prepared to return to New York City. She was a different woman now, successful, respected, and above all, the mother of 4 extraordinary boys. The nervousness she felt wasn't out of fear of Michael, but of how her sons would react when they learned the truth about their origins. On the morning of the trip, Jessica put on her most elegant grey suit, styled her auburn hair, now shoulder length, and gathered the boys in the living room. They all wore identical navy blue blazers, beige pants and light blue shirts, the uniform of the private school they attended in Cambridge. Remember what we talked about? Jessica asked, adjusting Ethan's tie. That we're meeting a man who's important for your career in New York City, the boy replied. And that we need to be polite even if he's annoying, Noah added. Jessica smiled, trying to hide her anxiety. That's right. And remember, no matter what happens, we're in this together, okay? The 4 boys nodded in unison, a peculiar habit that always impressed those who met them. Though physically identical, each already showed a distinct personality. Ethan was the natural leader, Noah the skeptic, Mason the sensitive one, and Jacob the quietist was the observer. The drive to New York City took longer than usual due to traffic. Jessica used the time to call Eleanor, who now nearly 80 remained her closest advisor. I'm nervous, Eleanor, she confessed. What if he tries to take the boys from me? He has no legal grounds for that, the former judge replied firmly. You used donated biological material for research and he signed the consent. Besides, he never contributed a single cent to raising them. Stand your ground, Jessica. You're not going to apologize. You're going to demand medical information to save your son. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now, back to the story. Fate had a peculiar sense of humor. The building that once housed Michael's company, headquarters had been acquired by the Fairmont Group the year before, thanks to a brilliant legal maneuver orchestrated by Jessica. Now Michael occupied just one floor of the building, where he had once reigned supreme. As she entered the lobby with her 4 boys, Jessica felt every eye turn toward them. It wasn't unusual. Her identical sons always drew attention, but here in the halls where Michael walked daily, the impact was even greater. The 4 were the spitting image of the businessman in his youth. "Ms. Mitchell, what a surprise," the receptionist greeted. "Mr. Reynolds didn't mention any visitors today." "That's because he doesn't know," Jessica replied, handing over a business card with the Fairmont Group logo. "Tell him the legal director would like to discuss an urgent personal matter." The receptionist hesitated, eyeing the 4 identical boys curiously before making the call. Minutes later, they were led to Michael's office. Time had not been kind to him. At 45, Michael looked much older, with deep receding hairline where thick locks once were, and dark circles carved by years of stress and legal investigations. When the door opened, he stood with his back to them, gazing out the window at the city. "Jessica," he said without turning, "I heard you're working for my competitors now. Did you come to gloat in person?" When he finally turned around, the words died in his throat. His eyes darted from his ex-wife to the 4 boys standing beside her. The shock was so great that Michael had to grip the desk to steady himself. Jessica watched his emotions unfold in slow motion. First surprise, then confusion, followed by a slow, painful understanding as he examined each identical face before him. The blood seemed to drain from his face, leaving him pale as paper. In that moment, Jessica felt something unexpected. Not the vengeful satisfaction she had imagined, but a pang of compassion. Seeing Michael confronted so abruptly with the consequences of his actions and lies didn't bring the pleasure she had anticipated after years of planning. The boys, oblivious to the drama unfolding, looked curiously at the man who was growing, paler by the second. Ethan, the most observant, tilted his head slightly, as if scientifically analyzing the stranger before him. Noah furrowed his brow, his suspicious expression revealing his protective nature. Mason, always the most empathetic, seemed concerned about the man's obvious discomfort. Jacob, the quiet dreamer, simply watched everything with wide eyes. In a moment of clarity, Jessica realized this encounter wasn't just about her and Michael, or about revenge and redemption. Above all, it was about 4 innocent children whose lives would be forever changed in the next few minutes. What is this?" stammered Michael, his voice little more than a strangled whisper as he paled. Jessica took a deep breath, mentally adjusting her plan. Originally, she had intended to be cold and calculated, throwing his paternity in his face like a weapon. But looking at the confused faces of the children, she opted for a more restrained approach. "These are Ethan, Noah, Mason, and Jacob," Jessica said calmly, "your biological sons." Michael staggered back to his chair, unable to tear his gaze from the boys who were exact replicas of himself as a child. Remember that fertility study for executives you participated in 9 years ago?" Jessica asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Your samples were preserved. I used them to fulfill my dream of being a mother after you threw me out of the house." The boys watched the scene with growing curiosity. It was Jacob who first noticed the framed photograph on the shelf behind the desk. Michael and Jessica on their wedding day, smiling and in love. A lifetime ago. "Mom, is that you in this picture?" the boy asked, stepping closer for a better look. "And is that the important man?" As Jessica struggled to find words, Ethan, always the most observant, approached Michael and declared with surprising confidence, "We look like you." Michael, still dazed, could only nod. Noah, never satisfied with half answers, quickly added, "Why didn't we ever meet you before?" I didn't, Michael began, looking to Jessica for guidance. Mason, the most sensitive of the four, sensed the rising tension and moved closer to Jessica, silently holding her hand. But it was Jacob who remained fixated on the photograph, his eyes shifting between the image of the happy couple and the tense reality before him. "Were you two friends?" he persisted, his soft voice contrasting with the tension in the room. Jessica didn't have time to respond. The office door opened again and an elegant woman entered carrying folders. Patricia Reynolds, Michael's mother and Jessica's former mother-in-law, stopped abruptly at the sight before her. The last time the two had met was the night Jessica was thrown out of the house, when Patricia had called to try convincing her to give him another chance, blaming stress for his excesses. "Good heavens," she exclaimed, bringing her hands to her face. "Michael, these boys, they look just like you as a child." Patricia slowly approached the four boys, examining each little face with growing emotion. "Jessica?" she asked, finally recognizing her former daughter-in-law. "How's are they yours?" "Ours," Jessica corrected. "Mine and Michael's." Patricia, ever the practical matriarch, quickly recovered from the initial shock. "Well, that explains why I never knew about them. Michael would have told me if he knew, wouldn't you, son?" Michael still seemed unable to speak, his gaze shifting between the four boys and Jessica. "Actually, Mrs. Reynolds," Jessica explained, "Michael didn't know they were conceived after our divorce through assisted reproduction." "But how?" Patricia began, confused. At that moment, Ethan, always the most straightforward of the brothers, approached Michael and asked bluntly, "Are you our father?" The innocent question dropped like a bomb in the office. Michael looked at Jessica, who nodded slightly, authorizing the response. "Biologically, yes," Michael answered after a long silence, "but I didn't know about your existence until now." "Why don't you live with us?" Ethan continued. "Because your father and I separated before you were born," Jessica intervened, gently, "but that's not important right now. We're here because Jacob needs medical information about his father's family." Jessica briefly explained Jacob's condition, while Patricia listened attentively, already stepping into her role as a concerned grandmother. Michael, still in shock, let his mother take charge of the situation. "My brother had something similar when he was young," Patricia said. "I'll gather all the family's medical records, and of course Michael will take all the necessary tests, won't you, son?" Michael simply nodded, still processing the news that he was the father of identical quadruplets. "Mum, I'm hungry," Noah announced, breaking the tension. Patricia immediately took command. "Come on, let's all have lunch while we discuss what needs to be done. My grandchildren can't go hungry." The impromptu family gathering moved to a nearby restaurant. While the boys devoured burgers, the adults tried to figure out their next steps. Michael, gradually recovering from the shock, alternated between looking at his sons in wonder and shooting accusing glances at Jessica. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked when the boys were distracted. "And give you the chance to reject them, like you rejected me," Jessica replied. "You threw me out of the house, Michael. Humiliated me publicly for not being able to get pregnant while secretly sabotaging my attempts with birth control in my medicine." Michael paled again. "How did you? I found out. And now you know why I never came back to ask for anything, not even alimony, after the divorce." Patricia, who had been listening, turned to her son in shock. "You did what?" Before Michael could respond, his phone rang. After a brief conversation, he hung up with a grim expression. "I have to go. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is at for the company." "The tax fraud investigation?" Jessica asked, sighing. "You knew?" Michael asked bitterly. "Of course I knew. I work for your competitors, remember?" Jessica paused. "But I wasn't the one who turned you in, if that's what you're thinking. Your own mistakes caught up with you." Michael stood up, took one last look at the four boys, and then at Jessica. "We need to talk seriously. About them." "Yes, but first deal with your legal troubles," Jessica said firmly. "The boys will stay in New York City for a week for Jacob's tests. You have my number." As Michael hurried out, Patricia took Jessica's hand. "Please don't keep me away from them. I may not have been the best mother-in-law, but I'm the only grandmother they have." Jessica looked at the four boys, now, eagerly debating which dessert to order. The boys deserve to know their father's family, she agreed, but on one condition, no excessive luxuries or gifts to win them over. I'm raising them with values different from Michael's. Patricia nodded, emotional. Thank you, Jessica. And I'm sorry I didn't realize sooner what kind of man my son had become. In the following days, while Jacob underwent tests, Patricia insisted that Jessica and the boys stay at her home. The generational meeting was surprisingly harmonious. The grandmother was enchanted by her grandsons, and the boys loved hearing stories about their father as a child. Michael kept his distance, wrapped up in his legal troubles, but sent a clear message. Once the situation stabilized, he would demand his rights as a father. On the fourth day in New York City, Jessica received an alarming call from Catherine Fairmont. Jessica, there are rumors in the industry about your children. Someone is spreading that you used Michael Reynolds' genetic material without authorization. This could jeopardize your position here. Jessica's heart sank. The only person who could have spread this story was Michael. He was using the children as leverage. The confirmation came in the form of a call from him that same night. We can make a deal, Michael proposed. I'll drop the investigations against your company, and you give me unrestricted access to the boys. Blackmail, Michael. Have you really stooped so low? Call it what you want. They're my children too, and I have the right to be part of their lives. Right? Jessica laughed bitterly. How you forfeited any right when you poisoned my medication to prevent a pregnancy that would interfere with your plans. Prove it, Michael challenged. Jessica took a deep breath. I won't play this dirty game. If you want to be part of their lives, it'll be on my terms. And the first one is stopping this smear campaign immediately. After tense negotiations, they reached a preliminary agreement. Michael could visit the boys twice a month, always in the presence of Jessica or someone she trusted. In return, he would immediately stop the rumors threatening Jessica's professional standing. When Jacob's medical results came in, the condition was confirmed, but fortunately treatable. The doctors now had the necessary family history to determine the best course of treatment. Jacob's illness, ironically, became the involuntary bridge for Michael's entry into his children's lives. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out. Now continuing. On the first official visit, Jessica took the boys to Central Park. Michael arrived punctually, visibly nervous, and carrying 4 identical packages. No expensive gifts, Jessica warned. They're just astronomy books, Michael explained, showing the contents. Patricia mentioned they're fascinated by stars. The boys accepted the gifts eagerly, especially Jacob, who was already flipping through his with shining eyes. Over the next few hours, Michael tried to connect with each of them, discovering their distinct personalities despite their identical looks. At the end of the day, while the boys played at a safe distance, Michael surprised Jessica with a confession. I always knew. Knew what? Jay, that the fertility issue was mine, not yours. Jessica felt the ground vanish beneath her feet, just like that night at the Plaza Hotel. What are you saying? 3 years before we met, I took a test that showed an extremely low sperm count, almost 0 chance of natural conception, Michael admitted, avoiding direct eye contact. When we got married, I already knew, but I couldn't tell you. I was afraid you'd leave me for another man who could give you children. Then why sabotage my treatments? Why not just admit it? Because I promised a future I couldn't deliver, he answered bitterly. The company was growing, the pressure for an heir was mounting, and I was trapped by my own lies. It was easier to make you seem like the problem. Jessica watched the children playing, trying to process this new, painful layer of betrayal. Then why blame me publicly? Why humiliate me like that? Because I was drunk and desperate. Because I knew the truth would come out someday. Michael paused. And because you were considering adoption, something I didn't want but didn't have the courage to openly refuse. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Jessica. The biological children Michael had so feared not being able to have were right there, playing just a few feet away, conceived in a way he could never have imagined. I think we both made serious mistakes, Jessica finally said. I shouldn't have used your genetic material without consent, even considering what you did. One more reason to try and make this work now, Michael replied, for their sake. The following months brought unexpected challenges. While Jacob responded well to treatment, the relationship between Jessica and Michael fluctuated between tense cooperation and distrust. The boys, however, thrived with their father in their lives, especially Mason, who developed a special bond with Michael. Jessica watched this closeness with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was happy the boys had the chance to know their father. On the other, she feared the influence Michael might have over them. Their values remained fundamentally different despite the difficulties he was facing. The investigations against Michael continued, though at a slower pace. His once powerful company lost contracts and market value daily. In contrast, Jessica's career kept rising, with the Fairmont Group expanding nationally under her legal guidance. It was during this time that Matthew Sanders, one of Michael's major shareholders and an old friend, approached Jessica privately. "I have information that could finish Michael for good," he offered, showing documents that proved systemic fraud. "But I'll only give them to you. I've always admired your work, even when you were in his shadow." Jessica examined the papers with growing discomfort. The evidence was irrefutable. If presented to the authorities, it would certainly lead to Michael's arrest. The thought of her sons seeing their father taken away by the police deeply disturbed her. "Why are you giving this to me?" she asked suspiciously. "Because Michael Reynolds stepped on a lot of necks to get to the top, including mine," Matthew answered, bitterly. "And because I think you, more than anyone, deserve to decide his fate." Jessica kept the documents, promising to think about it. That night, after putting the boys to bed, she reflected at length on her choices and motivations. When she first met Michael, she had been an idealistic lawyer who believed in justice above all else. What had she become? Someone willing to use insider information to destroy the father of her children. The next day, during a scheduled visit from Michael, Jessica confronted him. "Matthew Sanders came to me," she said, watching her ex-husband's reaction closely. "He has documents proving your fraud." Michael paled. "And what do you plan to do with them?" "That depends on you." Jessica took a deep breath. "I'm willing to help, but on one condition. You need to confess your responsibilities and seek a deal with the authorities." "That would ruin me," Michael exclaimed. "I'd lose everything." "You're already losing everything, Michael. The difference is you could rebuild your life without the shadow of prison. More importantly, your sons wouldn't have to visit their father behind bars." Jessica's words hit Michael like a punch. For the first time, he seemed genuinely concerned about someone other than himself. The boys, would they know? Not the details, not now. But one day they'll grow up and understand. The question is, what story do we want them to know? One about a father who owned his mistakes and tried to make them right, or one about someone who stayed on the wrong path to the end? Michael agreed to consider the proposal. In the following weeks, with Jessica's discreet guidance, he negotiated a deal with the district attorney's office, confessing to lesser crimes in exchange for immunity in the more serious cases. The company would be restructured, many assets sold to pay fines and settlements, but he would avoid prison. This unexpected collaboration between the ex-spouses caught the attention of the specialized press. Rumors about the 4 identical boys began to circulate, and soon the story of the successful lawyer who returned with quadruplets after being humiliated by her ex-husband became the talk of New York City's business circles. Catherine Fairmont summoned Jessica to an emergency meeting. "Our company is being investigated for alleged insider trading," she said worriedly. "They're accusing you of using insider knowledge from Michael's company to benefit our business." Jessica felt a chill. She knew she had been absolutely ethical in her professional decisions, but the appearance of impropriety, especially now that her relationship with Michael had become public, could be devastating. "We need someone to testify about your integrity," Catherine continued. "Someone who knows the inner workings of Michael's business and can confirm you never used confidential information." Jessica immediately realized who Catherine was referring to. Michael. Exactly. If he testifies in your favor, the investigation will likely be dropped. The idea of relying on Michael to save her career was deeply uncomfortable for Jessica. For years, she had built her life independently, and now she was once again at his mercy. But for the sake of the children, the company that trusted her and her own reputation, she had to try. To her surprise, Michael agreed immediately. "I'll testify, not for you, but for the boys. They deserve a mother whose reputation is intact." The hearing was scheduled for 3 months later. During that time, the dynamic between Jessica and Michael continued to evolve. He faithfully attended the bi-weekly visits, always respecting the boundaries Jessica had set, and gradually earned not only the children's trust, but also a newfound respect from Jessica. A week before the hearing, Jacob suffered an unexpected relapse. The 4 adults who cared most for him, Jessica, Michael, Patricia, and Eleanor, gathered at the hospital, united by their shared concern. It was in this moment of shared vulnerability that old resentments truly began to dissolve. "I never thought I'd say this," Eleanor remarked, watching Michael asleep in the chair beside Jacob's bed after spending the entire night telling stories to distract him. "But he really cares about these boys." "People can change," Jessica replied, surprising even herself with those words. On the day of the hearing, the Supreme Court was packed. The press eagerly covered the case involving 2 of the country's largest construction firms and the personal drama of their top executives. Jessica, impeccable in a navy blue suit, sat beside her legal team, while Michael waited in the hallway to be called as a witness. The decisive moment came when Michael was summoned. Under oath, he stated unequivocally that Jessica had never used insider information from his company to benefit the Fairmont Group. More surprising was his public admission. "If there's anyone in this room whose ethics should be questioned, it's me, not Jessica Mitchell. I've made serious mistakes, both professionally and personally, especially with her. The fact that she allows me to be part of our children's lives today shows more generosity than I deserve." The statement caused a stir in the courtroom. The judge, impressed by the testimony, called for further investigations before issuing a final decision. As they left the Supreme Court, Jessica approached Michael. "Thank you for what you did in there." "I only told the truth," he replied, "something I should have done years ago." In the weeks that followed, the case against Jessica was dismissed due to lack of evidence. The Fairmont Group emerged stronger from the crisis, and Jessica's reputation as an ethical and skilled lawyer was further solidified. Michael, meanwhile, continued the slow process of rebuilding his company under new principles, inspired by the integrity he had witnessed in his ex-wife. The lives of the 4 boys found a new balance. Though they still lived with Jessica in Cambridge, they visited their father and grandmother regularly in New York City. Patricia, now a doting grandmother, made sure to organize Sunday lunches, where the whole family gathered, including Eleanor, who had found an unlikely friend in Patricia. On the boys' 8th birthday, Jessica organized a simple party at Eleanor's countryside home. To her surprise, Michael arrived early to help with the preparations. "Beautiful place," he remarked, taking in the property with its fruit trees, well-tended garden, and views of the Cambridge Hills. "Your mentor has good taste. It's where she grew up," Jessica explained as she arranged the gifts on the table. "When her parents passed, she chose to keep the property rather than sell it. She says she thinks better here." They worked side by side in silence for a few minutes, laying out tablecloths and arranging chairs under the large tree where the party would take place. It was strange, Jessica thought, how they had reached this point of civil cooperation after everything. Watching Michael interact with their sons, who were now helping to fill balloons, she barely recognized the arrogant man who had humiliated her so many years ago. He had lost weight, and his once impeccably dyed hair now showed strands of gray at the temples. His clothes, though still elegant, were simpler than the designer suits he used to wear. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The hard glint of ambition had been replaced by something softer, more human. The legal battle, for the near bankruptcy, the discovery of his sons, it had all changed Michael deeply. At first, Jessica had doubted this transformation, certain it was just a strategy to gain access to the boys or restore his public image. But as the months passed, it became clear the change was genuine. "Can I talk to you in private?" he asked, when they finished setting up the tables. Patricia, who had arrived with a mountain of homemade sweets, gave them a curious look as she took charge of the decorations, directing the grandchildren to hang the banners exactly as she had planned. Walking through the orchard, Michael seemed nervous, reminding Jessica of the insecure young man she had met 2 decades earlier. He picked a ripe orange and began peeling it absent-mindedly, a habit Jessica recognized from their married years. Michael always fidgeted with something when he had something difficult to say. "I've been offered a position to lead a social housing project in Miami," he began. "It's a chance to start over, to do something meaningful." Jessica felt a tightness in her chest. Miami was over 1,000 miles from Cambridge. What about the boys? That's why I wanted to talk. I won't accept it if it means seeing them less. Michael paused. Actually, I was thinking maybe it would be better for them if we tried again. Not as a couple, but as a more united family. Jessica looked at him in surprise. "Are you suggesting I move to Miami with the boys?" "No, of course not. Your life is established here." Michael took a deep breath. "I'm willing to turn down the offer if it means keeping our current arrangement. They're more important than any career opportunity." At that moment, Jessica realized just how much Michael had truly changed. The man who had once prioritized his career above all else was now willing to give up a fresh start for his children. "Take the job," she said after a moment of reflection. "We'll figure it out. The boys can spend vacations with you and there's video calling. It's not ideal, but it's better than depriving them of the chance to see their father building something positive." "Are you sure?" "I am. Besides," Jessica smiled faintly, "the Fairmont Group is considering expanding to the Northeast next year. I can request to lead the project." As they returned to the party, where the 4 boys were now playing animatedly with cousins and friends, Jessica reflected on the incredible journey she had taken. 9 years earlier, she had been kicked out, with just 1 suitcase, humiliated and without prospects. Today, she was a respected professional, a mother of 4 wonderful children, and had finally made peace with her past. During the celebration, Ethan, ever observant, asked, "Mum, are you and Dad back together?" "No, sweetheart. We're friends now, which is even better for you all." "But you look at each other differently," the boy insisted. Jessica smiled, ruffling her son's blonde hair. "Sometimes life surprises us, Ethan. What matters is that we're all learning to be a family, even if it's different than we imagined." In the years that followed, this new family dynamic continued to evolve, not without challenges. Jessica's decision to move to Miami wasn't met with enthusiasm by everyone. Eleanor, in particular, questioned the choice. "Are you sure you're not sacrificing yourself for him again?" the former judge asked during a video call a few days before the move. "It's not for him, Eleanor," Jessica explained as she supervised the Packers. "It's for the boys, and honestly, it's for me too. This fresh start in Miami represents something new, something I'm building consciously, not out of obligation or convention." Adjusting to life in Miami was more challenging than Jessica had anticipated. The weather, the culture, the pace of life. Everything was different from New York City and Cambridge. The boys, now 9, missed their friends and familiar routines, but they also fell in love with the beach, which they visited almost daily after school. Jessica settled into a spacious, ocean view apartment in Park Slope, just 15 minutes from the house Michael had bought in Brooklyn Heights. They lived separately, but close enough for the boys to move freely between their parents. The arrangement, of course, sparked speculation. Colleagues, neighbors, the boys' friends' parents, everyone had theories about the nature of Jessica and Michael's relationship. Some romanticized it, seeing a reconciliation in progress. Others, more skeptical, suspected financial or legal motives behind the closeness. The reality was far more complex and much less sensational. Jessica and Michael had developed a relationship that didn't fit into any conventional category. They weren't a couple, but neither were they just ex-spouses co-parenting. There was a bond forged through trauma, painful revelations, reluctant forgiveness, and above all, 4 children they both loved deeply. "How would you define your relationship?" Amanda once asked during a visit to Miami for a medical conference. Jessica thought for a moment before answering. I think we're survivors of the same shipwreck. We ended up on the same island and realized that for the sake of our kids, we had to cooperate to build something livable from the wreckage. The boys, entering their preteen years, developed increasingly distinct personalities despite their identical appearances. Ethan, the strategist, already showed an interest in chess and mathematics, often sitting down with Michael to learn about financial management. Noah, the defender, had a strong sense of justice and would join Jessica in some of her community initiatives. Mason, the artist, spent hours drawing and creating stories, his room covered in sketches of Miami's landscapes. Jacob, fully recovered from his genetic condition, had become surprisingly athletic, excelling in swimming. Jessica's career flourished even further when she dedicated part of her time and resources to a foundation offering free legal support to women in vulnerable situations. The Fresh Start Project, as it was named, quickly gained national recognition, attracting volunteers and donations. One particularly busy afternoon at the foundation's headquarters, Jessica received an unexpected visit. Michael, carrying a stack of documents. "These are deeds to 3 commercial properties downtown," he explained. "I want to donate them to the Fresh Start Project. You need space to expand your services, don't you?" Jessica looked at him, surprised not just by the generosity but by the genuine enthusiasm on his face. "Why?" "Because I believe in what you're building," he replied simply. "And because I want our children to see that I'm using my resources for something that truly matters." Inspired by Jessica's determination, Michael dedicated his recovered company to sustainable social housing projects. His work in Miami, initially seen as a setback in his career, became his passion. He found purpose in creating dignified and affordable homes, especially for single mothers, a cause he embraced after truly understanding the challenges Jessica had faced. There was no romantic reconciliation. Some wounds run too deep to fully heal, but a mutual respect and genuine partnership in raising their children blossomed between them. Together, they showed the 4 boys that growth and redemption are always possible, even after the gravest mistakes. One Sunday afternoon, as the extended family, including Eleanor and Patricia, who had developed an unlikely friendship, gathered for lunch on the porch overlooking the ocean, Jessica watched the scene with a sense of peace she never imagined possible years before. Here were people who had deeply hurt one another, now sharing a meal and laughter, united by their love for the 4 children who had transformed their lives. Years later, when Jacob, now a healthy teenager, asked Jessica if she regretted anything, her answer was simple. "I only regret not believing in myself more from the beginning. But every step, every decision, every mistake brought me to you 4, and for that it was all worth it." The girl who once cried at the bus station had become a woman who not only survived, but thrived in adversity, building a legacy of strength and dignity for her children. The end. What did you think of this journey of resilience? Do you believe Jessica made the right choice by allowing Michael into the boys' lives? Leave your comment, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts on this story of new beginnings.